on the budget itself. And therefore your priority in spending in many other areas gets adversely influenced. We've first taken up, petrol has already been decontrolled, linked to the market. Diesel has been decontrolled and linked to the market. Stage 3, with effect from 1st January 2015, the LPG subsidy has started going into the bank accounts. I foresee the next stage where we've given sufficient indication that some sections which don't need the LPG subsidies will have to forego that. The next is going to be translated to the bank accounts is going to be kerosene. And the entire duplication on that and the diversion will have to be brought to an end. Now, after we've lessened the burden in these areas, we intend tackling the more difficult area which was indicated by one of the questions earlier, fertilizer. What will happen, I can't say at this stage. How do we discipline the states? Well, this is a great challenge, and in the power sector, we've already said that the states will have to bear the cost themselves. And the states which are trying to bear the cost have completely unevened their own accounts. And therefore they are doing it at their own peril. It's a very challenging reform, because those who need the subsidies will certainly continue to get it. I have no doubt about that. But then in the first 7 months, we've already indicated the careful direction which we intend taking as far as subsidies are concerned. There is a slight pain in that, but we are trying to make the system realize it, so that instead of a confrontationist environment, this could be done by persuading people itself. Professor Nanda?
Professor, Finance Minister, sir, I'm over here, and thank you very much. And I apologize for the loss of my voice, so I'll start croaking pretty soon. Sir, I'm the director of IMA, and I want to congratulate actually the government for wanting to build institutes of excellence. I think given the demography of the country, given the vibrancy of the economy, we should have many, many outstanding institutions. And I have one caution and one request. My caution is hardware is a very, very small part of a high-quality institution. We should definitely have lots of good institutions, but it's not just the buildings. We should have extraordinary faculty and a wonderful, wonderful environment in those. So as we build all these new IITs and new IIMs and many other institutions, we should make sure that that element is taken care of. My one request in addition to this is, we do have some truly excellent institutions that have over a period of 5 decades or so done extremely well. For a country like India, with our ambitions, our growth trajectory, our ambition should be that some of these institutions are among the best in the world 10, 15 years from now. So as we try to expand our reach into the Indian population by having lots of top institutions, we should also support, just like China, Singapore, Hong Kong, other places have done, some of the institutions of excellence so that they are amongst the best in the world.
We have Mr. Watanabe from the Bank of Tokyo, Mitsubishi.
Thank you very much for giving a good opportunity. Regarding the comment is a return of investment. And I think the Bank of Tokyo Mitsubishi UFJ, of course, is originally the Japanese bank, but we have not only the Japanese but also the non-Japanese, so many customers. And we have been encouraging our customers to invest more to the India. But when look at the return of investment, I do some analyze for return of investment of our customers in different countries. I think the Asian countries. I think the highest return of investment of our customer is located in the Thailand. And in Asian countries, I think the lowest return of investment for a customer is India. Of course, this is generally speaking, but still our customer is struggling to make making a business in India. Of course, there are so many, I think the reasons. Some is the tax issues, some is too much competition. But anyway, so our customer is not reaping a profit, but at least they need minimum return of investment. I think that's why I think in order to encourage more investment from all over the world, encouraging the customers to invest more, I think they should have a minimum return of investment. That's my comment. Thank you very much.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, we have Mr. John Kerry. I'm told he's just arrived. Can I request him to come up to the stage, please? Mr. Kerry. Welcome, sir.
We welcome Secretary of State, United States of America, Mr. John Kerry, on the dais, and may we take this opportunity to welcome him with flowers and fruits. Additional Chief Secretary, Education, Government of Gujarat, Shri Arun Jaitley, will welcome Mr. John Kerry. Honorable Chief Minister has taken a new initiative in the direction of making Gujarat nutrition strong by starting a new way of welcoming guests with fruits which are later distributed among Anganwadi children.
Well, we've had many suggestions coming from amongst the CEOs who are here. The Prime Minister will also be joining us in a few minutes. We are indeed privileged to have amongst us two of the very distinguished participants in the vibrant Gujarat who specially come for this conference. The President of the World Bank, Mr. Jin Yong Kim, and the Honorable Secretary of State from the United States, Mr. John Kerry. They both have a great keen interest in India. This is the second time in the last few months that both of them are here, which only speaks of their great commitment to the relationship with India. While the Prime Minister should be here any minute with us, may I now call upon the President of the World Bank, Mr. Jim Yong Kim, to kindly address the CEOs.
Thank you very much. It was great to listen to your comments, and I'll try to be as brief as possible. First, I'm thrilled to be here. Honorable Minister Jaitley, Honorable Chief Minister, Secretary Kerry, it's great to be here, and it is especially apt for us to be here in Gujarat, talking about the future of course, this great state, but also all of India. At the World Bank, we're extremely optimistic about the growth prospects for India. We're going to announce the official figures on Tuesday, but I can tell you now that we think the growth in 2015 is going to be 6.4%, and we think there will be a significant increase in 2016. And there's no magic in coming up with these numbers, but what we do is we talk to many different economists, we talk to people on the ground, and most importantly, we take a hard look at the commitment of this government, especially, to making the kinds of tough policy decisions and implementing those policy decisions. And that, for us, is a huge part of what we think will happen. And let me tell you, when the numbers come out, you'll see that we really are firmly believing that India is going to be one of the leaders in the world in terms of growth. Now, today we heard a lot about the Make in India program, and we believe that bringing more primary manufacturing to India is a great plan if we can make it happen. Our private sector group, the IFC, did a study of a particular cement manufacturer and found that for every primary manufacturing job that was brought to a country, there were 20 other jobs in the supply chain and in distribution that were also created. So if we really can take primary manufacturing to another level in India, it'll have a huge impact on creating jobs for the 1 million people a month who are looking for them. One of the things that has been, frankly, a bone of contention between the government of India and the World Bank Group over years has been the Doing Business report. But we're so encouraged that Minister Jaitley and the Prime Minister have now committed to improving the Doing Business ranking. And some of you, those of you who understand Hindi, heard this story today. But let me tell it to you. What I said to the Prime Minister was that if the Doing Business ranking was based just on Gujarat, rather than being in 169th place, India would be in about the 50th place. And so this is maybe partly the reason that the Prime Minister has committed to moving India up that scale. And we are right here and doing everything we can to help them get there. The goods and services tax, GST, is extremely critical. We have looked at some studies. One of the studies shows that trucks in India travel about 250 kilometers per day. This is compared to trucks in the United States, which travel about 800 kilometers a day, and in Brazil, which travel 450 kilometers a day. And what was found is that those trucks are stationary in India about 60% of the time. We've heard of cases where exporters and manufacturing hubs like Tirupur and Coimbatore in Tamil Nadu will divert shipments several hundred kilometers just to avoid having to cross the Kerala border, where they could use the very high quality, very close by port of Cochin. Now, we know that the more uniform the GST is going to be, the better it will be, but we are extremely encouraged by the step of submitting the Constitution Amendment Bill, and we will do everything we can to help in making sure that it's implemented. Much of the talk today was on investing in hard infrastructure, in roads and energy. But we also are working very closely with the government of India on investing in human capital. For example, one of the top priorities of Prime Minister Modi is a program that he's calling Skilling India, improving quickly the skills and productivity of the Indian workforce. But I think very different from what the World Bank Group was saying and thinking 20 years ago, now there's overwhelming evidence that investments in human capital have a direct impact on growth. In a study that came out just 1 year ago, in which the lead author was former Secretary of the Treasury Larry Summers, he showed that from the years 2000 to 2011, in developing countries, in low and middle income countries, fully 25% of economic growth, 25% of all economic growth was due to better health outcomes. And also, with the great work that's being done by OECD, we now know that there's a pretty direct connection between the quality of education. For example, on the PISA test, how 15 and 16-year-olds do on standardized tests. We know that there's a strong connection between the quality of the educational system and economic growth. So we want to ensure everybody in this room that we're working very closely on health, on education, and on skills improvement with the government, and we are looking for ways of helping India leapfrog generations and get to a point where their healthcare systems and their educational systems are among the best in the world. On the issue of climate change, we've had extensive discussions, even today, with the government and there he is, excuse me, for talking while you're walking in, Prime Minister. We've had extensive discussions, and just today, what I told Prime Minister Modi was that India can be a leader on climate change going into the Conference of the Parties 21 in Paris. The quintupling of the ambition around solar energy is an extremely welcome development. Also, we think that we can find ways of growing the economy very rapidly in a much, much cleaner way. For example, there's a huge dividend to be gained from increasing efficiency, and again, we think there are many opportunities in that light. The effort to build cleaner, more livable cities will have a huge impact. Tackling age-old, difficult, complicated problems like having cleaner cook stoves for the poorest. If we can solve this problem, we can take a huge amount of carbon out of the air. And again, I think India should shoot toward walking into that Paris meeting absolutely being a leader on addressing climate change. You know, it's such a privilege to be here at what really does feel like an extremely important moment in India's history. All the pieces are in place, I think, for a truly historic transformation. At the World Bank Group, we're a unique organization. We work very closely with the government of India. We make extensive investments in the private sector through IFC, our private sector group. And we also even provide political risk insurance and credit enhancement through MIGA, the Multilateral Investment Guarantee Agency. We're thrilled to be working with the government of India. We're thrilled to be working with so many of you in the private sector. I believe that together, with the Prime Minister's leadership, we can all help to build India that's not only a model economically, but even a model morally, in which a rapidly growing economy is both inclusive and is addressing the most pressing issues of our time, like climate change. We know it's possible. We know that the conviction that the Prime Minister, that the Finance Minister, that the government has shown can take us to this place where India will truly be leading in so many areas and everyone else will be running to catch up. It's a privilege to be here. I thank you for your attention, and I thank you, Prime Minister, for the invitation.
We are all fortunate to have the Prime Minister of India amidst us today for this CEO's session. The Indo-US relationship is growing and growing. This is for the first time in history that the President of the United States will be our chief guest at our Republic Day celebrations. It's also for the first time that the President of the United States would be visiting India twice during his term. It hasn't happened earlier in history. We've just had a summit a few months ago at Washington when our Prime Minister was here with the President. And within a period of 4 months, we'd be having the second summit between the two heads of government. That's where the relationship between India and the United States has been today. The Honorable Secretary of State, Mr. John Kerry, has been attending this vibrant Gujarat along with a very large number of CEOs from the United States of America. I would now request him to kindly take the dais and address this gathering.
Before Mr. John takes the dais.
Well, thank you very, very much, Mr. Prime Minister. It's a privilege to have an opportunity to twice be able to address this extraordinary conclave. And I'm particularly privileged to do so following my friend Jim Kim, who is doing an extraordinary job at the World Bank. And I appreciate the opportunity to share a few more thoughts with all of you at this remarkable conclave. When Prime Minister Modi visited Washington last fall and we were privileged to receive him, I thought that no matter how hard we rolled out a red carpet anywhere, we'd never be able to top the rock star reception that he received at Madison Square Garden. I don't know how many of you saw that. But it's clear from this conclave, from the meeting this morning and the several thousand people who must have been there to cheer the efforts of this conclave, as well as walking out with him afterwards, the shouts of approval. This Prime Minister is on the right track, and it is clear that his policies are beginning to reverberate and be felt by people. I want to thank Secretary Ban for his commitment to be here also, and for the work he is doing not only on sustainable development but also on conflict resolution in the Middle East and a bunch of other challenges that we face. And when you look at the long list of challenges that leaders across the world are wrestling with right now, even as I stand here at this moment, a great march is taking place in Paris with leaders who've come from around the world in order to stand up against extremism. And so, from the barbarism, the nihilism of ISIL, to the challenge of Ebola, to the conflict of Ukraine and the way it has demanded that Europe respond and the imposition of sanctions, to the devastation that we see in Syria and areas of conflict from the Sahel to the Maghreb to the Arabian Peninsula to the Middle East to South Central Asia. Everybody here knows that you are competing and working in a business world that is more complicated, not just by the kind of competition that you face, not just by the voracious appetite to grab market share somewhere as rapidly as you can and as effectively as you can, or to compete with internet sales and retail establishments and this incredible transformation that we're witnessing. In the midst of all that, we also know that we have the challenge of unprecedented numbers of young people. And that challenge is not unrelated to the extremism and the nihilism that we see in certain parts of the world. So being here is not just about business. It's also about building community, building nation states, building the possibilities of the future, which is the obligation of the leaders of the present. And the fact is that I sense that challenge more than ever before. I was privileged to spend almost 30 years as a United States Senator, all of them on the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. I traveled in the course of that time to many countries, including India, as I mentioned to you earlier this morning. But never have I seen the kind of global challenge that we face today, where so many young people, in some countries, 60 to 65% of a country is under the age of 30, 35. In many countries, 55, 60% are under the age of 25, 50% under the age of 21, and 40% under the age of 18. And we witness a moment where tens of millions of young people need to be educated, and educated quickly. And if their only alternative is a madras or some other kind of isolated so-called education in which they are separated really from modernity, then our challenge is even greater. That's the backdrop for the world that we're operating in today. But notwithstanding that backdrop, the truth is that there are fewer people being killed in conflict than there were in the last century, by far. And the fact is that we are witnessing a transformation taking place in business and in governance that is working hand in hand with business in ways that it never might have imagined, so that we actually face many more opportunities at a time of gains that we might never have imagined. Take Ebola, for instance. A few months ago, people all around the world were threatened and felt the possibility of imminent cross-boundary invasion of a disease that might be pandemic and incapable of being controlled. But we came together. When I say we, governments at the United Nations and elsewhere came together in a way that effectively marshaled a response. We're still involved. We're not out of the woods. But we've proven to people that they don't have to live in absolute daily fear, that there are ways to manage a cure. And that is why governance is important. In the same way, the rules of the road for business. The United States has been blessed with a particularly strong transformation in this last year or two. We've had 58 straight months of job growth as of this December. We've seen unemployment fall to 5.6%. We've created 11.2 million jobs in the last 58 months. The trade deficit has been narrowed by $3.2 billion. And real GDP in the United States grew at 5% on an annual rate over the third quarter. So, even in the midst of this moment of challenge, we're seeing other opportunities. I believe that this is a time, frankly, of remarkable opportunity. And this conclave, this kind of gathering, is absolutely the appropriate place and time to be thinking about the future and defining the challenge for all of us. Because there is no question in my mind that there's more on the positive side of the ledger than on the negative. And we are witnessing a moment where there's probably more business opportunity than any time in modern history. Transformations are taking place in pharmaceuticals, in construction materials, in retail products, in connectivity, in communications, in technology, in education itself. More people are traveling than ever before. More people connected on the internet. More people talking to people in some other part of the world on a daily basis about everything all the time, which is changing politics itself. Those kids who gathered in Tahrir Square in Egypt were in communication, texting and working through smartphones. And ironically, that transition in government had absolutely nothing to do with any extremism or any kind of religious effort. It was young people, the very young people I talked about a moment ago. That fruit vendor in Tunisia who ignited, some people say, the whole Arab Spring, was tired of being slapped around by corrupt police. And so he demonstrated because he wanted to be able to sell his goods in the street unimpeded by corruption. And from there it went to Syria, where young people came out into the streets asking for a future. And when they were met by goons who beat them up, their parents came out in the street and protested the way they'd been treated. And when they were met by bullets, that's what began what has transformed into one of the great tragedies of our modern time, with almost 3/4 of the population of the country currently displaced. So there is a connection. The point I'm trying to make to everybody is there is a connection between the choices you make in business, the kind of business that you run, what you aspire to do as business people in working with governance and others in order to set standards. A connection between that and the political world that we live in. Now, I believe that in the case of India, their future is unlimited. And there are incredible strengths that India has to build on. But there are three big questions that we have to answer together. How do we deepen our economic partnerships? How do we do that in a way that has shared prosperity and makes good ground on the vision that Prime Minister Modi has put at the center of his agenda that I mentioned today, the Sabka Saath, Sabka Vikas, participation of all, development of all? That's really at the heart of this transformation that's taking place and the challenge of governance today. And number three, and I'm so pleased that I've heard it from so many speakers today, how are we going to respond to this challenge of global climate change? Well, just very, very quickly, because I don't want to abuse the privilege of speaking this second time. Innovation and entrepreneurship have tied the United States and India together more and more. And it is clear that any country that matures its capacity for innovation and entrepreneurship will have natural advantages over those countries that don't. None of us can sit back in this fast-paced world that we're currently living in. Nothing can be taken for granted. But it seems to me that through innovation, carving out a new track, we have an ability to be able to address the concerns of people. For every $1 billion that you spend on infrastructure, between 27,000 and 35,000 jobs generally are created. India has enormous infrastructure needs. So do we in the United States, by the way. We need to build an entirely new energy grid. We need to connect parts of our country that today are not even connected. And there is, in the building of these grids, in the effort to go out and provide for the capacity of businesses to get their goods to the marketplace and find the people they need to develop those goods and make those goods and sell those goods and stay competitive, there is in all of that an enormous amount of money to be made and enormous possibilities for growth and development. The Ford Motor Company is spending $1 billion to turn its new auto plant right here in Gujarat into a regional manufacturing hub. And American subsidiaries of Indian-owned companies employ tens of thousands of people in the United States. I met this afternoon with a group of CEOs who were telling me about the ways in which we could do more to build each other's economies. American utility firms are very eager to help Prime Minister Modi to meet his goal of bringing power to every single Indian home before the end of the decade. And that's a goal I know that many of the countries assembled here share. At the current moment, Tata is expanding operations and adding to their American workforce like never before. And I've seen it firsthand in my hometown of Boston, where Tata has bought and refurbished the Ritz-Carlton Hotel and restored it to a premier destination once again. And now Tata is investing in sustainable mining all over the world, and the Adani Group is building infrastructure and connecting ports across India and Asia. So, my friends, this opportunity is gigantic. And if we work intelligently together, then we have an ability to be able to make this happen. Now, one thing leaps out at me as I go from country to country more than anything else. All of us have to work, as Prime Minister Modi worked when he was here in Gujarat exclusively, to guarantee that decisions get made. That when a company applies for a zoning permit or a permission, or for land or for any other thing, those decisions need to be made. That we no longer live in a world where a country is going to be competitive if its bureaucracy sends people from door to door and window to window and meeting to meeting, and letters don't get answered, and people can't be told, yes, you can go ahead. The competition for higher standards of accountability and transparency and decision making is going to only grow more and more. And it's those countries that move, as Prime Minister Modi has committed right here in Gujarat. He put in place a model of how raising standards actually increases growth. And that will become the hallmark of growth, I am convinced, for all. The second thing, and there are only three, I'll be very quick. The second thing is, throughout time, poets and philosophers and travelers of all types have marveled at the diversity of India, its languages, its people, its talents. India's religious and ethnic diversity is a source of extraordinary strength, and time and again it has proven one of the most important catalysts for growth and for discovery. Inclusive growth means investing in women and girls. The fact is that no society can get ahead with half of its population, half of its team on the bench. I met with a remarkable group of women this afternoon, women entrepreneurs right here in Gujarat. And I think all of you agree that women leaders play a critical role in driving some of India's most successful and innovative businesses. And what we need to do is make sure that we break down the barriers all across the globe so that we can maximize the possibilities of this period of growth. The final thing I want to just say is on climate change. There are 18 countries that are deemed to be the biggest emitters of greenhouse gas. We are one of them. The United States is number 2. We were number 1. We have now been surpassed by China. Those 18 countries are sometimes the butt of some anger from very small nations in the world, Pacific Island nations, coastal nations, others, who are feeling the greatest brunt of climate change, but who contribute the least to it. What I want to emphasize to everybody here today is very simple. No single country, not the United States, not China, not India, not Mexico, not Korea, not Japan, not Indonesia, not any of the major greenhouse gas emitters can solve this problem by itself, nor can those 18 major emitters solve the problem without the developing world. Because the developing world now constitutes more than 50% of all the greenhouse gas emissions. That's what we've come to. And so think of it this way. If every single American biked to work or carpooled to school, if we used only solar panels to heat our homes, if each person in America planted 12 trees over the course of the next weeks and months, if we somehow eliminated all of our greenhouse gas emissions to zero, guess what? that still would not be enough to offset the carbon pollution coming from the rest of the world. The exact same thing would be true if India or China did the same thing, got down to zero. Bottom line is, we all have to be part of this solution. And every company here has to start making choices. You think it's more expensive to invest in a particular form of energy that may be cleaner, not as cheap as coal, not as cheap as oil or dirty oil, but you're wrong. Because there's no cost accounting that is done that actually tallies up the real cost of our current dependency on fossil fuels, which is reflected in children who go to hospitals with lung problems, people who get cancer because of particulates in the air, devastation to coastal communities in storms that are increasingly more ferocious, unbelievable destruction to crops and agriculture that is now coming as a consequence of climate change, and a host of other problems. When I arrived in India 2 summers ago, Uttarakhand was grappling with historic floods that killed nearly 6,000 people. And when I visited Tacloban last year, in the wake of Typhoon Haiyan, I'll tell you, it's incomprehensible to me that that kind of storm could become the norm. In 2013, countries in southern Africa experienced the worst droughts that they had seen in 30 years. In Brazil, they saw the worst drought in half a century. New Zealand recently experienced a drought that was so bad that farmers had to slaughter all of their dairy cattle and sheep because they didn't have enough food and water to be able to keep the animals alive. So these are the problems that global climate change is already causing. And there isn't a scientist worth his or her salt who won't tell you that the problem is going to grow more severe. So I'm not going to go through what I said earlier about the largest market in the world, but I will tell you this. There is more money to be made in this transformation, more jobs to be created, more good to be gained, more lives to be saved, more damage to be reduced, more opportunity to be created than you can ever imagine by moving towards a clean energy, alternative energy base for all of this planet. We have the technology. We know how to do it. It's not a matter of some pie-in-the-sky solution that's hanging out there in the future. It's staring us in the face. What it needs is the political leadership that is prepared to make this choice. Mahatma Gandhi made a statement years ago that the Prime Minister repeated in his important book on climate change. Gandhi's words are as relevant today as they were when they were first uttered. He said, "One must care about a world one will not see." There isn't one scripture, not in the Quran or the Torah or the Bible, or almost any philosophy of life, that doesn't talk about the responsibility of generations to the next, about people's responsibility for creation. Even those who may feel momentarily insulated from climate change, make no mistake, the problem will grow beyond us unless we make the choices that we could make. Just as Gandhi and this great nation succeeded, I'm absolutely convinced, as your Prime Minister is convinced, and as he singled out those words in his book, we can all succeed protecting the world we will not see if we make the right choices now. And guess what? You can actually make a lot of money doing it and strengthen your nation in the process. So I hope that out of this will come a new resolution to do that, and also to understand the connection of these business choices to the effort we are all engaged in to build safe and secure and prosperous countries. Thank you.
Thank you, Secretary Kerry. We take this opportunity to welcome Honorable Prime Minister Shri Narendra Modi, and may we request Honorable Chief Minister of Gujarat Srimati Anandiben Patel to welcome Honorable Prime Minister.